You don't notice it at first. That's the most dangerous part. It doesn't arrive as chaos or cruelty. It arrives as intensity, as passion, as a feeling that finally, someone sees you, and you tell yourself, this is what love is supposed to feel like. But slowly, quietly, it begins to change you. You start waking up tired, even after a full night's sleep. Not physically tired, something deeper. Like your nervous system is always on guard. Like you're bracing for impact that never fully comes, but never fully leaves either. You replay conversations in your head, wondering what you said wrong. You measure your words before you speak. You shrink your reactions. You second-guess your instincts. And without realizing it, you start outsourcing your sense of reality to someone else. That's how a toxic relationship doesn't just hurt a man. It rewires him. Because men aren't destroyed by yelling or insults alone. They're destroyed by erosion, by emotional contradiction, by being pulled close and pushed away so often that the brain confuses anxiety with attachment. One moment, you're her anchor, her safe place, the only one who understands her. The next, you're distant, cold, not enough. And you chase that earlier version of yourself, the one she praised, like a ghost. You tell yourself, if I just try harder, she'll come back to how she used to be. That belief becomes the trap. This is where dark psychology takes hold. Intermittent affection is more addictive than consistent love. Your brain releases dopamine not when you're happy, but when you're uncertain and then briefly rewarded. Just like gambling, just like a slot machine. You keep pulling the lever, hoping this time you'll win her warmth again. And every time she withholds it, you internalize the loss. You stop asking what she's doing to you, and start asking what's wrong with you. That's the quiet destruction. Your confidence doesn't collapse all at once. It leaks. You hesitate before making decisions you used to make easily. You feel guilty for wanting space, ashamed for having needs, weak for feeling hurt. And the scariest part? From the outside, you still look fine. You're functioning, you're showing up, you're smiling when required. But internally, your identity is fragmenting. You're no longer acting from desire. You're reacting from fear. Fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of being misunderstood again. You start walking on emotional eggshells, and after a while, you forget what solid ground feels like. This is how a toxic relationship reshapes a man's masculine core. Not by making him aggressive, but by disconnecting him from his inner authority. You stop trusting your judgment. You override your intuition. You apologize for emotions that are completely human. And when a man loses trust in himself, he becomes easier to control, not just by her, but by life. You might tell yourself you're staying because you love her, but deep down, there's something darker keeping you there. Hope. Hope that the chaos has meaning. Hope that the pain will eventually justify itself. Hope that if you endure long enough, you'll be rewarded with peace. But hope, when mixed with emotional instability, becomes self-betrayal. And the longer you stay, the more your sense of self becomes conditional, based on her mood, her approval, her version of reality. That's when a man doesn't just lose a relationship. He loses himself inside it. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, if it feels like I'm describing thoughts you've never said out loud, then stay with me. Because understanding how this happens is the first step toward breaking its hold. This is Female Code Unlocked. If you're ready to see the psychology behind emotional power, attachment, and attraction, subscribe now. You're not here for surface-level answers. You're here for truth. When you finally think about leaving, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like withdrawal. Your body reacts before your logic does. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts race. You imagine silence where chaos used to be. And instead of relief, you feel panic. That's not weakness. That's conditioning. A toxic relationship trains your nervous system to associate instability with connection. So when you remove the instability, your brain reads it as danger. It's the same reason people miss places that once hurt them. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. You tell yourself you're staying to fix things, But what you're really doing is protecting yourself from the terror of emptiness. Because here's the dark truth no one says out loud. Leaving doesn't just mean losing her. It means facing the version of you that tolerated everything. That's a confrontation most men avoid. So you rationalize, you minimize. You remember the good moments like highlights in a dark film, replaying them on a loop. You forget that those moments only existed because of the contrast, because love was rationed, not given. And every time you go back, the damage compounds. You start to feel disconnected from other people. Friends seem distant. Conversations feel shallow. You don't want to explain what you're going through because you're not even sure yourself. How do you describe a wound that doesn't bleed? You become quieter, more guarded. Not because you're healing, but because you're numb. This is where a toxic relationship does its deepest work. It convinces you that intensity equals depth, that chaos equals passion, that calm equals boredom. So when you imagine a healthy relationship, it feels empty. No spikes, no drops, no emotional cliff edges. Your brain says, "Where's the spark?" But what it really means is, "Where's the anxiety I'm used to?" That's the rewiring. And it doesn't stop when the relationship ends. Even after you leave, or she leaves, you carry her voice with you. Not literally, internally. It shows up as self-doubt, as hesitation, as an invisible critic questioning your worth, your masculinity, your emotional strength. You might find yourself attracted to the same patterns again. Different face, same emotional volatility, same push-pull dynamic. Because trauma doesn't crave healing. It craves repetition. Until it's understood. This is why men coming out of toxic relationships often feel lost. Not heartbroken, disoriented. Like their internal compass has been magnetized by chaos and no longer points north. You wonder who you are without the conflict, without the drama, without the constant emotional labor. And for the first time in a long time, you're forced to sit with yourself. That's where the real destruction either completes or reverses. Because here's the part no one prepares you for. Healing feels boring at first. No emotional fireworks, no desperate longing, no roller coaster highs. Just silence, space, stillness. And if you've been trained to equate love with intensity, that stillness can feel unbearable. But slowly, if you let it, you begin to hear your own voice again. Your instincts return. Your decisions feel lighter. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You sleep deeper. You breathe fully. You remember what it's like to exist without being evaluated. And one day, you realize something chilling and liberating. The relationship didn't destroy you because you were weak. It almost destroyed you because you were loyal, empathetic, willing to endure pain for connection. Those traits aren't flaws. They were just weaponized against you. Understanding that is how you take your power back. There's a lie that settles into your mind after everything ends. It sounds mature, almost noble. That relationship made me stronger. I had to go through it to become who I am. But look closer. What if it didn't make you stronger? What if it just forced you to survive? Because survival and strength are not the same thing. Survival sharpens reflexes. Strength builds foundation. A toxic relationship doesn't teach you how to love better. It teaches you how to brace for impact, how to read micro-expressions, how to sense mood shifts before they explode, how to abandon your needs before they become a problem. That's not growth. That's adaptation to danger. And when danger is gone, those adaptations don't magically disappear. You might notice it when someone treats you well, and instead of feeling safe, you feel suspicious. You wait for the twist. You search for the hidden cost. You don't relax into affection, you analyze it. Because part of you still believes love is something you have to earn through suffering. That belief is the final scar. It shows up when you over-explain yourself, when you tolerate subtle disrespect, when you feel guilty for wanting consistency. It whispers, "Don't ask for too much. Don't rock the boat. This is as good as it gets." And that's when a man unknowingly recreates the same prison, just with different walls. Here's the darker psychological truth most men never hear. Toxic relationships don't bond you through love. They bond you through identity erosion. Over time, you stop asking, "Is this right for me?" and start asking, "How do I keep this from falling apart?" Your focus shifts from self-respect to maintenance, from authenticity to strategy, from desire to damage control. And when that becomes your default operating system, you lose touch with something essential, your internal center. Masculine strength doesn't come from endurance alone. It comes from self-alignment, from knowing where you end and someone else begins, from being able to say no without fear, from trusting that your boundaries won't cost you love, because love that demands self-betrayal was never love to begin with. That's the part the illusion hides. The relationship didn't build your character, it tested it. And what actually makes you stronger is not what you tolerated, but what you finally refused to accept. The moment you chose clarity over chaos, the moment you chose peace over intensity, the moment you stopped confusing emotional volatility with depth. Those moments are quiet. They don't feel heroic. No one applauds them. But they rewire your nervous system back toward self-trust. You start noticing the difference between attraction and anxiety, between chemistry and familiarity, between someone who excites your wounds and someone who respects your wholeness. And that distinction changes everything, because once you understand this, you stop romanticizing suffering. You stop seeing pain as proof of love. You stop believing that relationships are meant to drain you to transform you. Real strength doesn't come from being broken down. It comes from being grounded, from standing in yourself without needing to be validated, corrected, or emotionally tested. And when a man reaches that place, something subtle but powerful happens. He becomes less reactive, less available to manipulation, less interested in intensity for its own sake, not because he's closed off, but because he's finally solid. At some point, healing stops being about her. That's the moment everything shifts, not when you stop thinking about her, because thoughts fade on their own timeline, but when your attention turns inward again. When you stop asking, "Why did she do this to me?" and start asking, "Who was I becoming while I stayed?" That question isn't comfortable, but it's honest. Because reclaiming your identity after a toxic relationship isn't about becoming harder, colder, or emotionally unavailable. It's about becoming integrated, whole, self-directed. You begin to notice where you abandoned yourself, the moments you stayed silent to keep peace, the instincts you ignored because you didn't want to seem difficult, the boundaries you felt but didn't enforce, not with shame, with clarity. And slowly, you stop needing the past to make sense. You no longer need her to apologize. You no longer need closure from someone who couldn't offer consistency. You stop needing the story to end neatly, because closure comes from self-recognition. You start rebuilding trust, not with others first, but with yourself. You listen when something feels off. You act when a line is crossed. You leave situations that require you to perform instead of exist. This is where your nervous system finally exhales. You no longer crave emotional spikes. You're not drawn to chaos dressed as passion. You don't feel bored by calm. You feel strengthened by it. And here's the quiet power in that. Toxic dynamics stop recognizing you as a target. Not because you're intimidating, but because you're no longer available for confusion. You don't over-explain. You don't chase clarity from people who thrive on ambiguity. You don't negotiate your worth to stay connected. Your presence becomes grounded, predictable, in the best way, safe for yourself. And when a man reaches that state, relationships stop being battles for control or validation. They become spaces for expansion, or they end early, cleanly, without drama. That's real strength, not dominance, not endurance, but self-possession. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that walks away without hatred. The kind that chooses peace even when intensity is available. A toxic relationship can almost destroy a man, but only if he never learns the lesson hidden inside it. That lesson is this: Love should not cost you your identity. Connection should not require self-erasure. And intensity without safety is not depth, it's damage. If this resonated with you, you already know. You're not here for surface-level advice. You're here to understand the psychology beneath attraction, attachment, and emotional power. This is Female Code Unlocked. Subscribe if you're ready to see relationships clearly, not emotionally blind, not bitter, but aware. Because once you see the pattern, it can never control you again.